My name is Serena, and I just turned 34 last month. I've always been the kind of woman who takes pride in her home and marriage. Tonight was supposed to be perfect, our 5th anniversary celebration in our newly renovated house. Everything was going wonderfully until Mark's childhood friend Ashley arrived late, when she hugged him for what felt like forever. Something inside me stirred. I ignored it then. I wish I hadn't. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to deal with that one person who just won't respect boundaries. I first met Mark 7 years ago at a business conference in Chicago. I was presenting a workshop on interior design trends while he was there, representing his financial firm. Our eyes locked across the crowded hotel lobby after my session, and he approached with 2 coffees and the most charming smile I'd ever seen. By the end of the conference, we'd exchanged numbers, and within a week, he'd flown to meet me for our first official date. Our relationship moved quickly. Mark was everything I'd been looking for. Intelligent, ambitious kind, and he made me laugh like no one else could. After a year of long-distance dating and weekend flights, he proposed during a sunrise hike in Colorado. I said yes without hesitation. 6 months later, we were married in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. We settled in Boston, where Mark's financial advisory practice was flourishing. I established my interior design business specializing in residential renovations. We bought a charming colonial-style home in a quiet suburb and spent weekends transforming it into our dream space. Our life together seemed perfect, complementary careers, a beautiful home, and plans to start a family in the next year or so. Our social circle consisted mainly of other professional couples. There was Jack and Mia, who lived 3 houses down. Jack worked in tech, while Mia was a pediatrician. We had regular dinner parties with Brian and Tanya, who we'd met through a neighborhood book club. These friendships were straightforward, warm, and drama-free. But then there was Ashley. Ashley had been Mark's friend since elementary school. They'd grown up next door to each other in a small Connecticut town, attended the same schools, and even went to the same college before pursuing different career paths. According to Mark, they'd been inseparable as kids, supporting each other through family problems, awkward teenage years, and early adulthood challenges. The first time I met Ashley was 2 months after Mark and I started dating. She'd been travelling in Europe during our initial courtship, and Mark was excited for us to finally meet. He described her as practically my sister and the most loyal friend anyone could have. I was eager to meet this important person in his life. Our first meeting was at a casual restaurant downtown. I still remember how Ashley sized me up the moment she walked in. Her smile never quite reached her eyes as she hugged Mark for an uncomfortably long time, before briefly acknowledging me with a limp handshake. Throughout dinner, she reminisced about inside jokes and shared memories that excluded me completely. "Remember when your mum caught us sleeping in that tent in your backyard?" She'd laugh, touching Mark's arm. "Or that time we snuck into Professor Wilson's class completely hungover." Each story seemed calculated to establish her history with Mark while highlighting my outsider status. When I tried to join the conversation or share something about my relationship with Mark, Ashley would nod politely before swiftly redirecting the conversation to another Mark and Ashley memory. By dessert, I felt completely invisible. Later, when I expressed my discomfort to Mark, he dismissed it entirely. "That's just how Ashley is with everyone new. She's protective of our friendship, but she'll warm up to you. Just give her time." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be the understanding, secure girlfriend. So I tried harder at subsequent meetings, attempting to find common ground with Ashley, but each interaction followed the same pattern, her demonstrating her deep knowledge of Mark's life preferences and history, while subtly suggesting I couldn't possibly understand him as she did. There were countless small incidents over the years, Ashley calling Mark at odd hours for emergencies that turned out to be minor inconveniences, her showing up unannounced when she knew we had plans, giving him inappropriately personal gifts that referenced their shared past, making comments like, "I'm so glad Mark found someone who doesn't mind his snoring habit," or "Has he shown you that weird birthmark on his shoulder blade yet?" Each time I expressed concern to Mark, he would sigh and say, "You're overthinking this. Ashley doesn't have many close friends. Our friendship is important to her." Or worse, "You're being paranoid. There's nothing between us. Never has been." Eventually, I stopped bringing it up. I tried to minimize contact with Ashley and focus on our marriage, which was otherwise fulfilling and loving. Mark was attentive, supportive of my career, and we were building a beautiful life together. Why let one difficult friendship tarnish that? When our 5th anniversary approached, we decided to host a celebration at our home. We'd just completed a major renovation, adding a spacious deck and completely redoing our kitchen and living areas. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to celebrate both our marriage milestone and show off our hard work on the house. Of course, Ashley had to be on the guest list. "She's practically family," Mark insisted when I suggested keeping it to just our couple friends. It would hurt her feelings if we didn't include her. So I relented, hoping that in a larger group setting, Ashley's behaviour might be less noticeable. I was determined not to let her presence affect what should be a joyful celebration of our love and life together. How wrong I was. I spent weeks planning our anniversary party. Every detail mattered, from the signature cocktails named after meaningful places in our relationship to the playlist featuring songs from concerts we'd attended together. I ordered custom napkins with our wedding date embossed in silver, arranged for a professional photographer to capture the evening, and even had our wedding vows calligraphed and framed as a centerpiece. The menu was particularly special. I'd recreated dishes from significant moments in our relationship, appetizers from the restaurant where we had our first date, the pasta we'd learned to make together during a cooking class in Italy, and miniature versions of our wedding cake for dessert. As I arranged fresh flowers throughout the house the morning of the party, I couldn't ignore the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Would Ashley behave herself? Would Mark notice if she didn't? Would our special day turn into yet another opportunity for Ashley to assert her place in Mark's life? "You look worried," Mark said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. He kissed the top of my head. "Everything looks amazing. You've thought of everything." "I just want it to be perfect," I replied, leaning into him. 5 years deserves a proper celebration. "It will be perfect because you planned it," he assured me, "and because we're celebrating us. Nothing else matters." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. The first guests arrived promptly at 7. Jack and Mia brought a beautiful crystal frame with a photo of the 4 of us on a weekend trip to Cape Cod last summer. Brian and Tanya gifted us an antique silver wine coaster they'd found at an estate sale, knowing our love for vintage pieces. Other friends arrived with thoughtful gifts and warm congratulations. As I welcomed everyone, served drinks, and gave tours of our renovated spaces, I began to relax. The atmosphere was exactly what I'd hoped for. Warm, elegant, celebratory. Our home looked stunning with soft lighting highlighting the new architectural details. Mark stayed close by my side, his hand resting comfortably on the small of my back as we moved through the rooms. "You've outdone yourself," Mia whispered as we stood in the kitchen. "The house looks like it should be in a magazine, and those prosciutto-wrapped figs are divine." I felt a surge of pride. This was my domain, creating beautiful spaces and experiences. For a moment, I forgot about Ashley entirely. Then the doorbell rang at 8:30, an hour and a half after the start time noted on the invitations. Mark went to answer it while I was refilling the champagne bucket. I heard her before I saw her, that distinctive laugh slightly too loud, designed to draw attention. "Mark, oh my God, you look so handsome. Is that a new shirt? The colour brings out your eyes." I took a deep breath, plastered on my most gracious hostess smile, and walked toward the entryway. Ashley stood in our foyer, wearing a red dress that seemed more appropriate for a nightclub than an anniversary dinner party. Her sleek black hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup was flawless but heavy. She was clutching an oversized gift bag with tissue paper spilling out the top. "Serena, there you are," she exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Happy anniversary. 5 years. Who would have thought it would last this long?" I felt Mark stiffen beside me, but maintained my smile. "Thank you for coming, Ashley. Can I take your coat?" "This old thing is far too special for Mark and Serena," Ashley announced, thrusting the enormous package toward Mark, rather than me. "Open it now. I can't wait to see your face." Mark looked at me apologetically before accepting the gift. Inside was an extravagant crystal decanter, set that must have cost several $100s. "It's engraved," Ashley pointed out, taking the main piece and turning it to reveal the inscription, "To Mark. Some bonds can never be broken. Love, always, Ashley." My name was nowhere on the gift for our anniversary. "That's very generous, Ashley," I managed to say, taking the decanter from her hands and placing it on a side table. "Let me get you a drink. Everyone else is already in the living room." As I walked to the bar cart, I heard Ashley say to Mark, "Remember that cheap bottle of whiskey we shared the night before your finance exams? You were so nervous I had to practically force you to take shots." I returned with a glass of white wine, which Ashley accepted while continuing her conversation with Mark, as if I hadn't returned. Throughout the next hour, she found ways to touch him constantly, straightening his tie, brushing imaginary lint from his shoulder, placing her hand on his arm to emphasize points in her stories. Every time I tried to circulate among our other guests, I'd turn to find Ashley had maneuvered herself next to Mark again, leaning in close to whisper something, or laughing too loudly at his comments. When I rejoined them, she'd acknowledge me briefly before continuing whatever conversation they were having. I caught Mia watching the situation with concerned eyes. When Ashley excused herself to use the bathroom, Mia approached us. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "Everything's perfect." I insisted with more confidence than I felt. Just a full house of people celebrating with us. Mark seemed oblivious to the tension, happily chatting with friends and accepting congratulations. He was in his element as a host, charming and attentive to everyone, except he didn't seem to notice how Ashley was behaving or how it was affecting me. As I announced it was time to move to the dining room for dinner, I hoped the structured seating arrangement would provide some relief. I'd carefully planned the table placement to put Ashley between Brian and Jack, far from Mark. Somehow, by the time everyone was settled, Ashley had switched place cards and was sitting directly across from Mark with a clear view of him throughout the meal. I took a deep breath and determined not to let it ruin my evening. This was our celebration, and I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me upset. As dinner progressed, Ashley seized every opportunity to centre herself in the conversation. What should have been a celebration of our 5 years together increasingly became the Ashley show. "Mark, remember that summer when your parents let us use their lake house?" Ashley called across the table as I was serving the main course. "You were so proud of grilling those steaks, but you totally undercooked them. We all got food poisoning," she continued, addressing the entire table now. "His mum was so mad I was the only one who could still function the next day, so I had to take care of everyone." "I don't think I've heard this story," I said, trying to keep my voice light as I took my seat. "Oh, there are so many stories you probably haven't heard," Ashley replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mark and I have 20 years of history. Impossible to cover it all, I suppose." I noticed Tanya and Brian exchange uncomfortable glances. "The roast is delicious, Serena," Jack said, clearly attempting to change the subject. "Thanks, but I can't take credit. It's from that new butcher shop on Maple Street," I explained, grateful for the diversion. "Speaking of meat," Ashley interjected, "Mark used to be a strict vegetarian in college. Did you know that Serena, it was after we watched that documentary together. What was it called, Mark? Food Inc. Mark supplied, seemingly unaware of the pattern forming, but that only lasted about 3 months. 3 months and 2 days, Ashley corrected. You broke it when we went to that barbecue at Kyle's place. I still remember how guilty you looked biting into that burger. Throughout the meal, she continued this way, dropping references to events and preferences in Mark's life that I'd never heard about, always with the underlying message, I know him better than you do. What bothered me most was that some of these stories were genuinely new to me. After 5 years of marriage, how could there still be so many aspects of Mark's life I knew nothing about? Had he intentionally kept these stories from me, or had they simply never come up? When I mentioned a recent trip Mark and I had taken to Vermont, Ashley jumped in before I could finish. Vermont? Mark used to hate the cold. Remember how I had to practically drag you skiing that winter break? She turned to the table. He showed up wearing 3 sweaters and still complained the entire time. The food here is much better than anything we had in Vermont, Mark said, smiling at me. Serena's an amazing cook. It was a small gesture of support, but it felt significant after an evening of being systematically undermined. It's passable, Ashley said with a dismissive wave. Though the salmon is a bit overdone for my taste. Mark usually likes his fish barely cooked in the center. I gripped my fork tighter. Actually, Mark prefers his fish thoroughly cooked. He's always been concerned about food safety. Since when? Ashley laughed. We used to eat sushi all the time in college. He loved the raw stuff. People's tastes change, I said evenly. Some things never change, Ashley countered, holding Mark's gaze a beat too long. As dessert was served, Mark stood to offer a toast. My heart lifted as he raised his glass and looked at me with genuine warmth. To my beautiful wife, Serena. 5 years ago, you made me the happiest man alive by saying yes. Every day since has been better because you're in it. I love our life, our home, and most of all, I love you. To many more anniversaries. Everyone raised their glasses. To Serena and Mark, they echoed. I was about to respond when Ashley shot to her feet, glass in hand. I'd like to make a toast too, she announced. To Mark, my oldest and dearest friend. We've been through everything together, childhood crushes, awkward teenage years, college stress, career beginnings. I've seen you at your best and your worst. She paused dramatically. No one knows you like I do, and no one ever will. That kind of bond can't be manufactured or replaced. To lifelong connections that never fade no matter what other relationships come along. She didn't even look at me as she drank. The table fell uncomfortably silent. Mark looked conflicted, but didn't say anything to correct the inappropriate toast. I need to check on the coffee, I said quietly, rising from my seat and heading to the kitchen. Once alone, I gripped the counter and took several deep breaths. This was beyond Ashley's usual boundary-crossing behavior. She was deliberately trying to humiliate me in my own home on my anniversary in front of our friends. You okay? Mia had followed me into the kitchen. No, I admitted. What is her problem? Why is Mark allowing this? Mia put her hand on my shoulder. She's clearly threatened by you, by your marriage. And honestly, she seems on a mission tonight. I've never seen her this blatant before. What should I do? I don't want to cause a scene at our anniversary party. It's your anniversary, Mia reminded me. Not hers. You have every right to enjoy this evening without someone trying to stake a claim on your husband. She was right. I straightened my shoulders, fixed my lipstick using my phone camera, and picked up the coffee carafe with renewed determination. This was my home, my marriage celebration, and I wouldn't let Ashley ruin it. As we moved to the living room for after-dinner drinks, I resolved to stay close to Mark and assert my place as his wife. For a brief moment, as we sat together on the sofa, his arm around my shoulders, I felt things shift back into balance. Then someone suggested we share our favourite stories about Mark and me as a couple. I have the perfect one. Jack started, his face lighting up with genuine affection. Remember when you guys hosted that disastrous barbecue last summer, the one where the sprinklers suddenly went off? Everyone laughed, including Mark and me. It had been a memorable disaster that ended with all our guests soaked but still having a wonderful time. I love how Serena didn't even panic, Mia added. She just grabbed the wine bottles, held them up to protect them, and shouted, "Save the alcohol!" And Mark just stood there with that spatula. Brian joined in, completely drenched but still trying to flip burgers like nothing was happening. These were the kinds of stories I'd hoped for tonight. Warm memories that celebrated our relationship and the life we'd built together. As our friends continued sharing anecdotes, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to release. Tanya recounted how Mark had called everyone we knew for advice when trying to pick out my birthday gift last year. He was so determined to get it exactly right. I think he consulted at least 15 people. He ended up with the perfect vintage turquoise bracelet, I added, touching the piece I wore tonight, specially for the occasion. He remembered I'd pointed it out in a shop window months earlier. Mark squeezed my hand. Best money I ever spent seeing your face when you opened it. As our friends shared more stories, our legendary Halloween parties, the time we got lost hiking and ended up at a stranger's backyard wedding, how we'd helped Jack and Mia move during the worst blizzard in years, I watched Ashley growing increasingly agitated. She kept shifting in her seat, checking her phone and drinking heavily. Each story that demonstrated Mark's and my connection seemed to irritate her further. She would interject with, "That reminds me of when Mark and I..." But people had started politely talking over these interruptions. The wine and cocktails had been flowing freely all evening, and by this point, most guests, including Mark, were showing signs of being quite tipsy. His gestures were more expansive, his laughter louder, his stories slightly less coherent. Ashley had been matching him drink for drink, her lipstick slightly smudged and her eyes overly bright. "I think it's my turn to share a story," Ashley suddenly announced, standing up with her wineglass clutched tightly. The room quieted, perhaps out of politeness, perhaps out of morbid curiosity about what she might say. She positioned herself in the centre of the room, directly across from where Mark and I sat together. Something in her expression made my stomach tighten with apprehension. "I've known Mark longer than anyone here," she began, her voice carrying a slight slur. "We've been through everything together." This wasn't a new refrain from her, but something in her tone suggested she was building to something specific. "You all think you know Mark and Serena as this perfect couple," she continued, making a sweeping gesture that caused some wine to slosh over the rim of her glass. "But there are sides to Mark that only I've seen." I felt Mark tense beside me. For the first time that evening, he seemed to register that Ashley's behaviour was crossing a line. "Ashley, maybe we should move on to someone else's story," he suggested, his voice gentle but firm. She ignored him completely. "Did you know," she said, her eyes moving around the room before settling challengingly on me, "that Mark can't tie a tie properly to save his life, or that he gets so nervous before important meetings that his hands shake?" The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. This wasn't just another trip down memory lane. There was a pointed quality to her words now. Ashley took a dramatic pause, lifted her head high, and declared loudly, "I once fastened Mark's belt when he couldn't. Remember that, Mark, right before your job interview at Goldman, you were so nervous your hands were shaking." She let the statement hang in the air, her eyes locked with Mark's. The suggestive tone and the prolonged eye contact made the implication clear. This wasn't just about helping a friend. A few uncomfortable chuckles broke out around the room. Someone coughed. Mark's face had gone pale, but Ashley wasn't finished. "I've always taken care of Mark when he needed me most," she continued, swirling her wine. "Some connections just can't be broken by marriage, right?" The room grew painfully silent. I could feel everyone's eyes shifting between Ashley, Mark, and me, waiting for a reaction. Mia's mouth had dropped open slightly. Jack was suddenly very interested in his shoelaces. In that moment, something inside me snapped. 5 years of tolerating Ashley's boundary violations. 5 years of Mark dismissing my concerns. 5 years of being made to feel like an outsider in my own marriage. With perfect clarity and surprising calm, I stood up, picked up my untouched beer from the side table, and walked over to where Ashley stood. She smirked at me, clearly expecting me to run from the room in tears, or perhaps make some pathetic attempt to reassert my place in Mark's life. Instead, without a second's hesitation, I poured the entire cold beer over her sleek, glossy hair. The amber liquid cascaded down her perfect blowout, soaking her designer dress and dripping onto my carefully selected area rug. The whole room went dead silent, everyone frozen in shock. "Serena, what the hell are you doing?" Mark shouted, jumping to his feet. But I remained perfectly still, my empty glass still tipped over Ashley's head, my eyes locked with hers, as the smirk dissolved from her face. For a moment, the only sound was the steady drip of beer from Ashley's hair onto the hardwood floor. Then chaos erupted. Ashley let out a shriek that could have shattered crystal. "My hair, my dress! This is Versace, you psychotic bitch!" Mark rushed forward, not to my side, but to Ashley's, grabbing cocktail napkins from the coffee table. "Ashley, I'm so sorry! Are you okay?" His words hit me like a physical blow. Our guests sat frozen in horrified fascination, no one quite sure how to react to the scene unfolding before them. Ashley continued her theatrical performance, sobbing about her ruined outfit, while simultaneously shooting me triumphant glances when she thought no one else was looking. She was enjoying this. She had managed to drive a wedge between Mark and me on our anniversary night. "It's in my eyes. It burns," she wailed, clinging to Mark's arm. "I need to wash it out immediately." "Use our bathroom," Mark offered, guiding her toward the master suite. "Our private space. There are clean towels under the sink." I stood perfectly still, surrounded by spilled beer and stunned silence, watching my husband lead another woman to our bedroom. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, or judging by their expressions on our guests. "Well," Brian finally said, clearly attempting to diffuse the tension, "that's one way to end a toast." No one laughed. I found my voice at last. "I think the party's over," I announced with a calm I didn't feel. "Thank you all for coming." "Serena," Mia started, her face full of concern. "Please," I said quietly. "I'd like everyone to leave now." Our friends began gathering their belongings, murmuring awkward goodbyes and avoiding eye contact. Jack briefly placed his hand on my shoulder as he passed. "Call us if you need anything," he whispered. "Any time." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. As the last guests filed out, I heard Ashley's continued dramatics from our bedroom, Mark's soothing responses to her crisis. After the front door closed behind Tanya and Brian, I walked to the bedroom doorway. Mark was holding a wet washcloth, while Ashley examined her reflection in our bathroom mirror. Neither noticed me immediately. "It's ruined," she moaned, touching her damp hair, "and this dress will never be the same." "We can get it professionally cleaned," Mark assured her. "Don't worry." "I can't believe she did that," Ashley continued. "I was just telling a story. She completely overreacted." "Get out of my house," I said from the doorway. "Both of you!" They turned in unison, startled by my presence and my tone. "Serena, you're being ridiculous," Mark said, his expression a mix of embarrassment and anger. "It was just a story, was it?" I asked, my voice steady. "Just a story about how you needed another woman to fasten your belt. How convenient that she shared that particular memory tonight in our home at our anniversary party." "You're overreacting," Mark insisted. "Ashley and I are friends. We have history, that's all." "Friends respect boundaries," I replied. "Friends respect marriages. What she did tonight, what she's been doing for years, isn't friendship. And the fact that you can't see that tells me everything I need to know." Ashley had composed herself enough to attempt indignation. I have been nothing but supportive of your marriage. If you're too insecure to handle Mark having female friends, that's your problem. No, I said firmly. My problem is standing right in front of me, both of you. Now get out. I won't ask again. Mark's face flushed with anger. You can't kick me out of my own house. Watch me, I replied, stepping aside from the doorway. Go make sure Ashley gets home safely. That's clearly your priority tonight. You're being completely unreasonable, Mark sputtered. Ashley is upset. Her clothes are ruined. The least I can do is make sure she gets home okay. The least you could have done was stand by your wife when another woman was deliberately trying to humiliate her, I countered. But you didn't. So go, take care of Ashley, just like you always do. Something in my tone must have registered because Mark's expression shifted from indignation to uncertainty. Ashley, sensing her advantage slipping, grabbed her purse from our bed. This is exactly what I meant about connections that can't be broken, she said smugly. When things get tough, Mark knows who's really there for him. Leave now. My voice was ice. Mark hesitated, looking between Ashley and me. For a moment, I thought he might stay, might finally see what was happening. Instead, he sighed deeply. We'll talk when you've calmed down, he said, as if I were a child having a tantrum. This isn't like you, Serena. You're not thinking clearly. As they walked out, I heard Ashley's voice in the hallway. She's always been jealous of our friendship. I've tried so hard to include her. After the front door closed, I stood alone in our bedroom, staring at the wet towels on the floor and Ashley's lingering perfume in the air. The perfect anniversary party I had planned for weeks lay in ruins around me. Half-empty glasses on tables, plates of dessert, abandoned my special playlist, still streaming softly in the background. I sank onto the edge of our bed and finally let the tears come, not just for tonight's disaster, but for years of having my instincts dismissed, my boundaries violated, and my marriage undermined. The buzzing of my phone interrupted my breakdown. It was Mia. We're parked outside if you need us. Just say the word and we'll come back in. Their support was a small comfort in the midst of my crumbling world. I texted back, I'm okay for now, thank you. But I wasn't okay, not at all. And as I sat alone in my beautiful home, surrounded by the debris of my anniversary celebration, I wondered if my marriage had been built on a foundation of half-truths and omissions all along. 3 hours later, after I'd mechanically cleaned up the worst of the party mess and changed into pajamas, I heard Mark's key in the lock. The confrontation I'd been mentally preparing for was about to begin. Mark entered the living room where I sat in darkness, illuminated only by the dying embers in our fireplace. He paused in the doorway, clearly surprised to find me still awake. I thought you'd be in bed, he said, his voice subdued. The slur from earlier was gone. He seemed entirely sober now. Where would I sleep? I asked quietly. Our bed still smells like Ashley's perfume. He sighed heavily and moved into the room, switching on a lamp. I could see he'd changed his clothes, his dress shirt and slacks replaced by jeans and a sweater I didn't recognize. Where did you get those clothes? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mark at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. I stopped at my gym bag in the car. I keep extra clothes there. It was the first lie of the night. The gym bag excuse might have worked if I hadn't noticed the fresh shower scent coming from him, his damp hair, and most tellingly, the unfamiliar laundry detergent smell on the clothes. Mark had clearly showered and changed at Ashley's place. Don't insult my intelligence, I said flatly. Not tonight. He collapsed onto the armchair across from me, running his hands through his hair. Fine. I went to Ashley's. She was upset and needed help cleaning up. I took a shower and changed there. Nothing happened. Nothing happened, I repeated. Just like nothing has been happening for the past 5 years every time she calls texts, shows up or inserts herself into our lives. Serena, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Yes, Ashley was inappropriate tonight. The belt story was over the line. I'll talk to her about it. But pouring beer over her head in front of all our friends, that was completely uncalled for. I stared at him in disbelief. That's what you're concerned about. My reaction, not the years of her overstepping boundaries, not her deliberately trying to humiliate me at our anniversary party, not you rushing to her side instead of standing with your wife. You assaulted her, Mark exclaimed, and she's been assaulting our marriage since the day we met, I shot back. The difference is, I finally did something about it. Mark's expression hardened. You're being irrational. Ashley and I have a long friendship that predates you. Yes, she can be possessive sometimes, but she's been through a lot. Her parents' divorce, her own failed relationships. She doesn't have many people she can count on. So I'm supposed to tolerate her behavior because she has issues. What about me, Mark? What about what I've been through? Watching another woman constantly try to stake a claim on my husband while he does nothing to stop it. You're exaggerating. Ashley respects our marriage, I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call what happened tonight? Respect? Telling everyone she fastened your belt, implying she takes care of you in ways I can't, declaring that your connection with her can't be broken by marriage. Which part of that was respectful? It was one inappropriate comment after too many drinks, Mark insisted. You're reading too much into it. No, I said firmly. I've been reading too little into it for too long. I want the truth, Mark. All of it. What exactly is your history with Ashley? He shifted uncomfortably. We're childhood friends. I've told you that. Friends don't behave the way she does. There's more to this story, and I want to hear it. Now. Mark stared at the floor, his jaw working, the silence stretched between us filled with unspoken truths. We dated, he finally admitted. Briefly, in college. The confirmation of what I'd long suspected hit harder than I'd expected. How briefly? Senior year, about 8 months. 8 months isn't brief, Mark. That's a relationship. Why didn't you tell me? He shrugged defensively. It was a long time ago. It didn't seem relevant when we met. And honestly, it ended badly. I didn't like thinking about it. How did it end? I pressed, needing to understand the full picture at last. Mark exhaled slowly. I broke it off. Ashley wanted to move to New York together after graduation. I had the job offer in Boston. We wanted different things. And how did she take the breakup? His hesitation told me everything. Not well. She thought we were taking a break, not breaking up permanently. When I started dating someone else a few months later, she didn't handle it well. Define didn't handle it well. She showed up at my apartment, called my parents, sent emails to the girl I was seeing. Mark looked genuinely uncomfortable now. It was a difficult time. Eventually she calmed down. We took some space, and when we reconnected as friends a year later, I thought she'd moved past it. Except she clearly hasn't, I pointed out. She's been marking her territory around you since the day we met, and you've allowed it. Why, I felt guilty, Mark admitted, for hurting her, for breaking her heart. Ashley doesn't let people in easily, and I was one of the few she trusted completely. I didn't want to cut her out of my life entirely. So, instead, you've let her undermine our relationship for 5 years. You've dismissed my concerns, made me feel paranoid, and allowed her to disrespect me repeatedly. I never thought she'd go this far, Mark said defensively. I thought she'd accepted our friendship for what it was. She's in love with you, I stated plainly. She always has been. And on some level you've enjoyed the attention. The way she makes you feel important, irreplaceable. You've been feeding her hope that someday you'll realize she's the one you really want. That's not fair, Mark protested. I've always been faithful to you. I've never given Ashley any reason to think there could be something between us. Haven't you? By maintaining such intimate contact, by dismissing my concerns, by rushing to her side tonight instead of supporting me. The fight seemed to drain out of Mark suddenly. He slumped in his chair, looking smaller somehow. I've messed up, he admitted quietly. I should have told you about our history from the beginning. I should have set clearer boundaries with Ashley. I didn't want to hurt her again. So you hurt me instead, I concluded, over and over. We sat in heavy silence, years of unspoken tensions finally surfacing between us. "I need you to leave," I said eventually. "I can't look at you right now without seeing you rushing to Ashley's side, without hearing you defend her after everything she's done." "Serena, please," Mark began, a note of panic entering his voice. "We can work through this. I'll talk to Ashley, set firm boundaries. I'll tell her she needs to respect our marriage or we can't be friends." "It's too late," I said wearily. "This should have happened years ago. I needed you to choose me to protect our relationship. Instead, you've been protecting her feelings at the expense of mine." "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, looking lost. "I don't know. A hotel, a friend's place." I paused. "Ashley's, since that's where you went tonight anyway." His face crumpled. "I don't want to lose you." "You should have thought of that sooner," I replied. "I need space to think, to decide if this marriage is salvageable." Mark gathered a few essentials and left without further argument, promising to call the next day. After the door closed behind him, I locked it and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. Alone in our house, I began a methodical search, something I'd never done in our marriage before. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it, Mark's old phone in his desk drawer. He'd claimed it was broken when he upgraded last year, but it powered on immediately. There in black and white was evidence of what I'd suspected for years. Hundreds of text messages between Mark and Ashley, nothing explicitly romantic or sexual, but a level of emotional intimacy that felt like a betrayal nonetheless. "Had a tough day. Only you would understand. Remember when we stayed up all night talking about our dreams? No one gets me like you do. Sometimes I wonder what might have been if things had worked out differently." Mark's responses were never overtly encouraging, but he never shut down these conversations either. He maintained the connection, fed the hope, kept the door cracked open just enough for Ashley to believe she still had a chance. As I scrolled through years of their private communications, I realized I'd been right all along. Mark hadn't been honest with me or with Ashley. He'd been trying to have it both ways. The stability and love of our marriage alongside the ego boost of Ashley's unwavering devotion. I put the phone down, suddenly certain of what I needed to do. This wasn't just about Ashley's inappropriate behavior at our party. It was about years of gaslighting, of having my instincts dismissed, of being made to feel like the unreasonable one for wanting basic respect in my marriage. I deserved better, and as painful as the road ahead might be, I knew I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. 3 months passed, in a blur of lawyer consultations, therapy sessions, and long conversations with friends who'd witnessed the deterioration of my marriage firsthand. After that night, Mark had moved into a short-term rental apartment. He called daily at first, sent flowers, wrote lengthy emails, apologizing and promising change. He insisted he'd cut all contact with Ashley, that he finally understood how inappropriate their relationship had been. "Too little, too late," Mia said when I showed her his latest message. We were sitting in my kitchen, still mine, as I'd decided to keep the house in the separation. He had years to make this right. "I keep wondering if I'm overreacting," I admitted, turning my coffee mug in circles on the countertop. Was one inappropriate toast really worth ending a 5-year marriage? "It wasn't one toast," Mia reminded me gently. "It was the culmination of years of disrespect from both of them. The toast was just the breaking point." She was right. In therapy, I'd begun to recognize the pattern of gaslighting I'd endured. Every time I'd expressed discomfort with Ashley's behavior, Mark had dismissed my concerns, made me question my own perceptions, painted me as jealous and insecure, rather than acknowledging the legitimacy of my feelings. "How are the sessions with Dr. Levine going?" Mia asked. "Illuminating," I replied. "She's helping me see how I let this situation continue for so long, how I kept compromising my own boundaries because I was afraid of seeming like the jealous wife." The early weeks after the party had been the hardest. Mark vacillated between contrite apologies and defensive accusations. "You embarrassed me in front of our friends," he'd say, still somehow missing the point that he had embarrassed me first by failing to stand up for our marriage. I'd discovered more text messages between him and Ashley from the night of the party and the following days. Despite his claims of cutting contact, he'd been consoling her, apologising for my behaviour, even suggesting they lie low for a while until things blew over. When confronted with this evidence, Mark had finally broken down and admitted the full truth. He'd been afraid of Ashley's reaction if he truly ended their friendship. "You don't know what she's capable of," he'd said. "The last time I tried to distance myself from her, she threatened to hurt herself." "That's manipulation," I pointed out, "and you've been enabling it at the expense of our marriage." It was the first time he seemed to truly understand the magnitude of his betrayal. 2 months after our separation began, Mark asked to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown where we'd often stopped on weekend mornings before the farmer's market. He looked different, thinner with dark circles under his eyes. "I've been seeing a therapist," he said immediately, working through a lot of things. "My history with Ashley, my inability to set boundaries, how I've treated you." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I've realised how unfair I've been to you," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "You were right about everything. Ashley never accepted our breakup. She never respected our marriage, and I allowed it because part of me enjoyed being the centre of her world." "I know," I said simply. "I've cut all contact with her," Mark continued. "For real this time. Blocked her number, email, everything. I even got a restraining order when she wouldn't stop coming to my apartment." That surprised me. "A restraining order?" Mark nodded grimly. "After I told her definitively that our friendship was over, that it had cost me my marriage, she escalated. Showed up at my workplace, sent hundreds of messages, threatened to tell people I'd led her on for years." He rubbed his face tiredly. "Maybe I did in a way, by never being completely honest about boundaries." "I'm sorry it came to that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want either of them to suffer unnecessarily. "I want another chance," Mark said, reaching for my hand across the table. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I've broken your trust. But I love you, Serena. These months apart have shown me how much I took for granted, how badly I messed up. I'm doing the work to change, to be a better man, a better husband, if you'll let me." 6 months ago, I would have accepted this apology, instantly grateful for any recognition of my feelings. But therapy had strengthened my resolve and clarified my worth. "I appreciate your honesty," I said gently, withdrawing my hand from his. "But I don't think our marriage can recover from this. It's not just about Ashley, it's about how easily you dismissed my concerns for years, how you made me doubt my own perceptions, how when pushed to choose you didn't stand with me." "I'm standing with you now," he pleaded. "Now that you've lost me," I pointed out. "That's not the same thing." In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I redecorated my house, erasing the last visual reminders of Mark's presence. I expanded my interior design business, taking on more commercial projects that challenged and excited me. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected and made new ones through a women's entrepreneurship group. Slowly, I began to recognize myself again. The confident, creative woman I'd been before years of subtle undermining had dimmed my light. Mark continued his campaign for reconciliation. Thoughtful gifts, heartfelt letters, even an offer to attend couples therapy. I considered it, briefly wondering if there was a version of our story that could have a different ending. But each time I imagined going back, I remembered the look on his face when he rushed to Ashley's side instead of mine. I remembered years of having my instincts dismissed. I remembered the texts. "No one gets me like you do." Some betrayals cut too deep for second chances. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable. Mark didn't contest my keeping the house, and we divided our assets fairly. On the day the papers were finalised, he sent a single white rose with a note, "I'll always regret losing you." 6 months after the disastrous anniversary party, I was having dinner with Mia and Jack at a new restaurant downtown when I saw them. Mark and Ashley seated at a corner table deep in conversation. They hadn't noticed me yet. "We can leave," Mia offered, immediately spotting them too. "No," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. "It's fine." And it was fine. Looking at them, I felt nothing but a distant pity. Whatever game they were playing now, reconciliation, friendship, relationship, it was no longer my concern. As if sensing my gaze, Mark looked up and saw me. His face registered shock, then shame. He nudged Ashley, who turned and spotted me as well. Her expression was harder to read, part triumph, part uncertainty. I raised my glass slightly in acknowledgement, then turned back to my friends, genuinely uninterested in their drama. In that moment, I realized I was truly free, not just from my marriage, but from the emotional web that had entangled me for so long. I learned that protecting your dignity isn't making a scene, it's refusing to be part of someone else's. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from people who make you question your worth. The beer, that was just a bonus. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a relationship where your boundaries weren't being respected? Comment below with your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life lessons. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about valuing themselves enough to walk away from situations that diminish them, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your intuition is usually right. Trust it.